I found my daughter bald on prom morning. Then her sister's shocking confession exposed a secret that tore our family apart. I always thought the biggest drama in our home would be about curfews or dresses, never something like this. On the morning of prom, my daughter's piercing screams jolted me awake. I rushed into her room and froze. Her blonde hair was scattered across the pillow, her head completely bald. Standing nearby in unicorn pajamas was her little sister, an electric razor resting on the nightstand, and a quiet confession on her lips that would unravel everything we thought we knew about our family. I awoke to my teenage daughter Lila's piercing screams. I rushed into her bedroom and couldn't believe what I saw. She was entirely bald, with her golden hair strewn on her pillowcase. She was sobbing, telling me that her younger sister, Mia, must have shaved her head while she was sleeping. She staggered to the bathroom mirror and began screaming even louder when she saw her reflection. Prom was in 7 hours, and she was supposed to be the clear choice for queen. Now it was wrecked. "Where's Mia?" I demanded. My husband discovered her sitting on her own bed in unicorn pajamas, with his electric razor on her nightstand. "Mia, what did you do?" I inquired, trying not to yell as Lila wailed in the restroom. "I had to stop her from going to prom," Mia said in that quiet voice she employs when she knows she's in danger, but believes she did the right thing. This was my baby, and he would still climb into Lila's bed during thunderstorms. Lila taught the same little girl how to ride a bike last summer. The one who followed her older sister around, asking endless questions about everything. I couldn't believe she would destroy her sister's special night-like way. Before I could reply, the doorbell rang. Dylan, Lila's boyfriend, let himself in as he usually did on Saturday mornings. He came upstairs, calling about corsage colors, and came to a halt when he noticed Lila's bald head. "What the hell happened to your hair?" he inquired, immediately rearranging his face in alarm. "Baby, don't cry. We can fix this. Maybe get you a nice wig. You'll still be the prettiest girl there." Lila started crying louder. Dylan yanked her into him, looking at me as if this was my fault. "Did Mia do this?" "I always said that kid was weird." "This is assault, Mrs. Adams." Mia came in the bathroom doorway, still dressed in her unicorn pajamas. "I cut off all her hair so she couldn't go to prom with you because you're mean to her." "Mia," I called out. But she kept speaking in that determined little kid voice. "You constantly hurt my sister. I can see purple marks on her arms from where you grabbed her too hard." The bathroom went silent. Dylan laughed, but it seemed forced. "Kids make up crazy stories, Mrs. Adams. Tell her, Lila. Tell your mom how good I am to you." Lila would not look at anyone. I could feel frost spreading through my chest. "I took pictures on Mommy's phone when Lila was sleeping," Mia continued, her voice rising. "You push her into walls, hit her tummy where no one can see, and then buy her presents so she won't tell." With trembling hands, I took out my phone and accessed the images. There they were. Close-ups of Lila's arms show finger-shaped bruises. Her ribs have dark purple markings. I felt my stomach drop. "Oh my God," I whispered. "Lila, is this true?" Dylan's face flushed. "Those could be from anything. She plays sports. This is insane. I spent hundreds on her. I'm taking her to prom in a limo." My husband appeared at the doorway. His entire body tensed as he glanced over my shoulder at the photographs on my phone. "Lila, baby, why didn't you tell me?" I said, my voice cracking entirely. Dylan's grasp on Lila tightened noticeably. "We're leaving right now. This is completely ridiculous. Get dressed, Lila." "She can't go anywhere if she's too embarrassed about her hair," Mia explained simply. "That's why I shaved it all off while she was sleeping, so she'd have to stay home safe." Dylan tried a different strategy. His voice became falsely pleasant. "Mia, sometimes Lila and I play rough while we're having fun. It's not abuse, just passion. You're too young to understand boyfriend-girlfriend stuff." My husband went fully into the bathroom and said, "Let go of my daughter right now." "But then you did this," Mia added. Everyone turned to look at her again. She took out her small pink tape recorder, which she used to create pretend radio broadcasts, and hit play. Dylan's voice broke through, little yet clear. She claimed it was from yesterday, while he was waiting in our living room for Lila to get ready. "Yeah, tomorrow night after prom," he exclaimed. "I'm going to get her absolutely inebriated at Jake's after-party, so she can't say no this time." My brother had already given me the ingredients for her drink, and it was time to lock that down before college. Nothing keeps a girl around like getting her pregnant. I felt like throwing up right there on the toilet tiles. Lila made an awful injured animal sound. She attempted to get away from Dylan, but he held on harder. "That's not real," Dylan said. Sweat was streaming down his face. "You're all crazy. That's not even my voice." "You were going to put something in my daughter's drink?" I asked quietly. My entire body shook with wrath like I had never experienced before. "You were going to assault my baby?" Dylan released go of Lila. He started backing up to the door, but my husband moved faster. He blocked the only exit with his entire body. I could feel the muscles in his jaw clenching as he stared at the boy who had been abusing our daughter for who knows how long. "You don't want to do this," Dylan explained. He tried to sound aggressive, but his voice cracked like a child's. "My father is a lawyer. If you touch me, I will ruin your entire family." My spouse took another step forward. Dylan flattened himself against the wall, searching for another way out. But Dylan abruptly stopped panicking, looked at my husband, and said in the coldest voice I've ever heard, "I really don't believe you want to do that, Mr. Adams. And I believe you understand why." My husband's face sank. Dylan's skin drained color, and his hands began to shake as he stood there with a smug expression on his face. I could see my husband's entire body stiffen, and something icy settled in my gut. Dylan knew something, and whatever it was terrified my husband. With all of us jammed in, the restroom felt far too small, and I could hear Lila's ragged breathing behind me. My spouse took a step back, and Dylan's smile spread wider. I positioned myself between them and took out my phone with trembling fingers. I pressed the record button and held it up so Dylan could see the red light glowing. My voice was more steady than when I warned him to leave our house right now, or I'd phone 911. Dylan only laughed and said his father would destroy us for this. He claimed we had no idea who we were messing with. Then he shoved my husband hard enough that he stumbled into the wall. I kept recording as Dylan stomped down the stairs, knocking the family photographs off the wall as he went. My husband followed him down, and I stayed with the daughters, who were also crying. Dylan was ranting something about attorneys and litigation from downstairs. The front door smashed so violently that the entire house shook, and his automobile engine screamed into life outside. His tires screeched as he drove out of our driveway, far too quickly for our peaceful street. My husband returned upstairs, and his face was still as white as a sheet. He glanced at all of us standing in the bathroom and suggested we go to the master bedroom to chat. We all filed down the hallway to my bedroom, where my husband locked the door behind us. Lila sat on the bed, still in her pajamas, and her bald head reflected the morning light from the window. Mia went up beside her sister and took her hand. I stood there staring at my husband, demanding to know what Dylan had on him. My husband sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. After a long pause, he glanced up and informed us that he had noticed bruising on Lila's wrist at dinner 2 weeks prior. He claimed he had gone to school the next day to confront Dylan about it. He found Dylan in the parking lot after baseball practice and grabbed him by his shirt. He admitted that he had slammed Dylan against his car and threatened to kill him if he ever touched Lila again. Dylan had videotaped the entire incident on his phone, including the threat. My husband's voice was full with shame as he told how Dylan had played the video for him right there. He claimed Dylan threatened him that if he ever interfered again, he would report it to the police and seek charges for assault. My wrath rose in my chest, mixed with my anxiety, and I felt like I was about to burst. I informed my husband that we needed to notify the police immediately away because of the abuse, the planned drugging, and everything else. My husband nodded, but expressed concern about Dylan's tape being used against him. He claimed Dylan's father was actually a lawyer, and a nasty one at that. Lila sobbed louder, saying she didn't want her father to get into trouble because of her. She kept repeating it was entirely her fault for dating Dylan in the first place. Mia crept into her sister's lap and placed her tiny arms around Lila's neck. She assured Lila, in a solemn small voice, that none of this was her fault. She proceeded. "Bad people do bad things, and that's on them, not on the people they hurt." As my family crouched on the bed, I picked up the phone and dialed the non-emergency police line. The dispatcher responded, and I stated that we needed to report domestic violence and a planned assault. My voice cracked as I informed her about the bruises and the recording of Dylan plotting to drug my daughter. She stated she'd send an officer to collect our statements and asked whether we were okay right now. I told her sure, but the boy had just departed, making threats. She instructed everyone to remain inside with the doors locked until the authorities arrived. While we waited, I requested Lila to show me her phone, which included Dylan's messages. She unlocked it with shaking fingers before handing it over. The texts were all there, dating back months. Messages in which he told her what to wear and who to talk to. There's something weird about Mia having all of this proof prepared, the images on Mom's phone, the tape recorder with Dylan's voice. I'm surprised why an 8-year-old would surreptitiously gather evidence like a child detective rather than simply informing her parents what she saw happen to her sibling. Apologies after he hurt her and blamed her for making him upset. Threats about what would happen if she attempted to leave him. One message made my stomach turn. He said he'd make sure everyone at school knew she was worthless if she broke up with him. Another person claimed he owned her and she should remember that. There were hundreds of them, and each one made me feel worse than the last. I began capturing screenshots of everything and sent them to my phone as evidence. Lila watched me with tears in her eyes and apologized repeatedly. My husband drew her close to him and told her she had nothing to be sorry for. He claimed we should have seen the warning signs and protected her more effectively. Mia mentioned that she had been trying to tell us for weeks, but we assumed she was just jealous of Dylan's attention. I grabbed my phone again and told Lila I needed to photograph all of the bruises for evidence. She nodded and carefully lowered her shirt, revealing dark purple markings on her ribs that made me feel nauseous. I snapped photo after photo, making sure each was clear and included the date stamp. She turned over to find additional bruises on her back, some yellow and faded, others fresh and dark. My hands shook as I recorded each one while she stood there in her bra, staring at the floor. The doorbell rang 20 minutes later, and 2 officers approached the bedroom after I let them in. I started by playing Mia's recording, which had Dylan's voice talking about drugging Lila at Jake's party. The younger officer's expression hardened as he listened, and he requested a copy immediately away. They made notes as Lila showed them the injuries, as I went through her phone's controlling text messages. The cops requested a detective and stated that one would arrive within an hour because this was a planned assault involving a youngster. We waited downstairs while they made calls and completed paperwork. Detective Sarah Bennett arrived 45 minutes later, dressed in jeans and a blazer, as if she had been called in on her day off. She introduced herself and said that she specialized in cases like these, before asking to question each of us separately. She began by taking Lila back upstairs to her bedroom, while the rest of us waited in the main room. I could hear their voices, but not the words, and it lasted about an hour. When it was my turn, I hauled everything upstairs. My phone, the images, Mia's audio recorder, and screenshots of Dylan's texts. Detective Bennett carefully examined each piece of evidence and assured me that we had done everything correctly by documenting everything and called immediately. She inquired about Dylan's family, and I informed her that his father was a lawyer called Richard Cole, with a large practice downtown. She jotted that down and inquired whether Dylan had ever threatened us before today. I told her about him and warned her that if my husband touched him, it would ruin our family. She then interviewed my husband, who admitted to pulling Dylan's shirt at school 2 weeks earlier. He explained that he had noticed fresh bruises on Lila's wrist and lost his rage, threatening Dylan to keep away from her. Detective Bennett explained that she understood a father's protective instinct, and that while it was not ideal, she would provide the context in her report. When she interviewed Mia, our young girl sat up straight and stated in a serious tone why she had shaved Lila's head. She stated she knew it was terrible, but she had to protect her sister from the bad guy who was going to harm her much more at prom. The investigator smiled and complimented Mia on her bravery in protecting her sister, even if chopping her hair wasn't the best option. Detective Bennett urged that we send Lila to the emergency room straight once to have her injuries documented by medical personnel. She handed me her business card and said she'd be in touch with the next stages, including an interview with Dylan and his family. We traveled to the hospital in silence, except for Mia, who wondered if she would go to jail for chopping Lila's hair. When I stated that we were in the emergency room for domestic violence documentation, they swiftly took us back. The doctor was a lady who spoke gently to Lila while she checked each bruise, measuring it with a ruler, and had a nurse photograph it. Lila grabbed my hand tightly when they asked about the stomach injuries, and she had to explain how Dylan would punch her there so no one could see. They performed a thorough examination and documented 17 individual injuries in varying states of healing. The nurse provided us with copies of everything for our records and the police. While we were waiting for discharge paperwork, a social worker walked in with a folder full of information about domestic violence resources. She stated that the hospital was compelled by law to report this to the authorities, which we had already done, and offered us referrals to therapy and support groups. She chatted with Lila about safety precautions and what to do if Dylan attempted to contact her. We were signing the discharge papers when my husband's phone called, and Richard Frank's name appeared on the screen. My spouse responded and turned it on speaker without saying anything. Richard's voice was loud and aggressive, and he threatened to sue us for all we had for assault and defamation if we continued to make false claims about his son. The social worker's eyes widened, and she took out her phone to capture Richard's outburst about how we'd regret messing with his family. My husband finally indicated we were at the hospital documenting Dylan's abuse before hanging up. The social worker stated that she would include the audio to the file as proof of witness intimidation. We left the hospital at midday and drove home in total silence, with Mia asking if Dylan was going to jail. My spouse kept checking the mirrors, as if he expected someone to follow us. When we turned onto our street, I noticed it right away. Dylan's black automobile was parked across from our house, its motor going. My hand shook as I grabbed my phone and dialed Detective Bennett's number from her card. She responded on the second ring and directed us to drive past our house and park somewhere secure while she dispatched a patrol car. We pulled into the grocery store parking lot 2 blocks away and waited. 10 minutes later, she called again, saying officers were at our house and we could return home. Dylan was already boxed in by 2 police cruisers when we arrived. Dylan sat with his arms crossed, looking irritated, as one cop wrote something at his window. The officer came over and told us Dylan said he was simply driving by, but they had warned him not to approach our property or any family members. They photographed his car and documented it as a violation in the case file. Dylan ripped out when they let him go, and the officers stayed until we were safely inside. That evening, as I was preparing dinner, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Karen Hughes from the school counseling office asked how Lila was doing. She'd heard about what happened from another employee and wanted to assist. She offered to arrange for Lila to have her homework mailed home so she wouldn't fall behind while coping with everything. I thanked her and said it would be really helpful because Lila wasn't ready to face everyone at school yet. An hour later, Detective Bennett called to provide an update. She hunted down Jake and interrogated him about the post-prom party preparations. Jake became extremely uneasy and revealed Dylan had ordered him to ensure Lila's drinks were extra strong that night. Dylan also mentioned receiving something unique from his brother to include in them. The investigator stated that Jake appeared afraid and was totally cooperating now that he recognized how serious the situation was. She also informed me she checked into Dylan's older brother, Mason Cole, who had 3 drug-related charges, including selling drugs to students at a community college. She was working with a judge to obtain a warrant to search Dylan's phone and vehicle for evidence. The next morning, a woman from Child Protective Services called to say they needed to do a house visit because youngsters were seeing marital violence. My stomach fell, despite the fact that I knew we had done nothing wrong. She planned it for the next day, explaining that it was usual protocol to ensure the children's safety. That night was terrible. Every automobile that passed made us jump. My husband woke up 3 times to check the locks on all of the doors and windows. Around midnight, I heard crying from Lila's room and discovered both children in her bed. Mia had gotten in with her big sister, and they were hugging tightly. Lila's face was soaked with tears, and Mia was caressing her back as Lila used to do for her during thunderstorms. I sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing their hair until they both dozed off. The CPS worker arrived at 9 a.m. the next day, with a clipboard and a serious expression. She interrogated each child individually in their rooms, while my husband and I waited in the kitchen. She spent about an hour with Lila, inquiring about our home and whether she felt secure here. Then she spoke with Mia, who supposedly told her everything about why she cut Lila's hair and gave her the photo she shot. When she finished, the worker grinned and stated we did an excellent job addressing the problem. She had no worries about our parenting and was impressed by the girls' protective nature toward one another. She handed us some leaflets about trauma and children before she departed. That afternoon, I received a call from someone named Rachel Morgan, who stated that she was a victim advocate assigned to help us. She indicated that we may submit an emergency protective order to legally keep Dylan away. She guided me through all of the paperwork over the phone and promised to help us prepare everything with our evidence. Mia's decision to take images before getting her haircut demonstrates some strong planning skills for someone her age. This child thinks 3 steps ahead, as if she were playing chess while everyone else was stuck on checkers. We spent 2 hours reviewing all of the hospital's images, videos, and documentation. She stated our case was very solid, and a court would probably grant it straight away. The following day, a certified letter arrived from Richard Frank's law firm. My husband opened it, and his face turned scarlet as he read. It was 3 pages of legal threats, claiming we had assaulted his son and made false claims that were harming his reputation. It threatened to sue us for everything we owned if we didn't drop the allegations immediately. It also highlighted the event at school where my husband grabbed Dylan's shirt, claiming it constituted assault on a minor. My husband's hands were shaking as he photographed each page and sent them to Detective Bennett. She called back within minutes, stating that there was clear evidence of witness intimidation and that any such threats should be noted. Monday morning arrived too quickly, and Lila had to return to school wearing a beanie to cover her bald head. I drove her because she was too terrified to ride the bus with everyone gazing at her. When we arrived, the parking lot was already busy, and I could see children pointing at our car through the windows. Lila gripped my hand so tightly that it hurt as we walked through the main doors together. The whispering began immediately, and I overheard one girl mention something about Lila making things up for attention. Another group of students approached us, and one boy told Lila that they thought her and Dylan were jerks. Anyway, the principal was waiting in the main office with a woman I recognized as Karen Hughes from the counseling office. Karen walked us into her office and handed us a new class schedule for Lila, which included alternate paths through the building. She explained that security officers would be looking for Dylan, and they relocated Lila's locker to a different hallway entirely. Karen led us down the new path to each class and showed Lila a secure area to use if she felt worried. My phone called as we were walking, and it was Detective Bennett, who said she had some information concerning the search warrant. She'd gone to Dylan's car with other officers that morning and discovered a little plastic bag hidden under the driver's seat. The pills inside looked like Rohypnol, and they were rushing them to the lab for testing, but she was confident in what they would find. Dylan was let out of his house in handcuffs after 2 hours, while neighbors watched from their drives. Detective Bennett called back to say he had been charged with possession of controlled narcotics and conspiracy to commit sexual assault. His father bailed him out before dinner, but at least he now had an official case number and actual charges filed. 3 days later, we sat in a courtroom for the emergency protective order hearing, with Rachel Morgan beside us. I had to step up and tell the judge everything about the abuse, as Lila shook in her chair. The judge listened to Mia's audio of Dylan plotting to drug Lila, and his expression hardened with each word. He interrogated my husband about snatching Dylan's shirt at school, and he confirmed everything while explaining that he was defending his daughter. The judge acknowledged a father's reaction and focused on Dylan's record of abuse over months. Dylan's lawyer attempted to claim that this was merely teenage drama that had been blown out of proportion, but the judge was not convinced. He immediately approved the interim restraining order and imposed harsh terms, including Dylan's inability to approach Lila within 500 feet. The following week, the school convened its own disciplinary hearing regarding Dylan's behavior on campus. The principal examined all of the evidence, including the drug possession charges and Dylan's history of hostile behavior in the halls. They promptly suspended him, pending the criminal inquiry, and barred him from any school grounds, including graduation. Dylan's father came up and yelled about litigation, but the school board did not back down at all. Lila began attending a therapist who specialized in assisting teenagers who had been abused by boyfriends or girlfriends. She sat there crying for the first several sessions, unable to express what had occurred to her. The therapist was patient, however, and Lila gradually began to open up about how Dylan made her feel worthless. She talked of being terrified all the time and not knowing what would set him off or cause him to grab her. The therapist helped her realize that none of it was her fault, and abusers are quite adept at making victims believe they deserve it. Our entire family began coming to therapy once a week to learn how to help one another. The therapist stated that Mia saw her sister in peril and performed the only action she could think of to keep her safe. It wasn't the best way to handle things, but it was a combination of love and terror in a child's mind. Mia informed the therapist that she had been witnessing Dylan mistreat Lila for months and felt little and useless about it. She explained that cutting Lila's hair was the only method she could think of to keep her sister home and safe that night. The therapist helped us all understand that families living with abuse must find new methods to communicate with one another. We practiced having difficult conversations about feelings without blaming or shaming anyone for their struggles. Lila and Mia began practicing activities together in which they could communicate their anxieties in a safe setting with guidelines for listening. I realized that I needed to look for clues that I had been missing and make room for my children to tell me anything. My husband had to deal with his guilt for not noticing the abuse sooner and his anger at the shirt-grabbing episode. The therapist said that trauma affects entire families, and we all needed time to recover from what Dylan had done to us. She assigned us assignments between sessions, such as writing in journals and conducting family check-ins every night at dinner. It was hard work, but I could see my daughter regaining trust and feeling safer in her own house. 3 weeks later, Detective Bennett called while I was preparing supper and asked if she might stop over to provide an update on the case. She arrived within an hour and sat at our kitchen table with her notebook open, informing us that 2 additional girls from Dylan's school had come forward after learning what had happened to Lila. Neither girl wanted to press charges, but they both detailed the same pattern of gripping too firmly, pressing into walls, and then buying expensive gifts to keep them quiet. The investigator stated that their statements would help prove to the prosecutor that Dylan had done this previously and would most likely do it again if he did not suffer serious repercussions this time. The next morning, we received a call from the district attorney's office informing us that Dylan will be prosecuted on various offenses, including assault, conspiracy to conduct sexual assault, and possession of controlled narcotics with intent to distribute. Richard Cole had already recruited 3 lawyers from the state's most expensive company, but the prosecutor stated our evidence was strong, and they were confident in obtaining a conviction. Lila was sitting next to me during the call, and when she heard the prosecutor imply that she could have to testify, her entire body tensed. After we hung up, she was quiet for a long time before explaining she wanted to do it, because other females needed to know they could speak up as well, and she wasn't going to let Dylan silence her anymore. My husband had been dealing with his own legal issues regarding grabbing Dylan's shirt at school, and met with a lawyer who examined all of the evidence, and concluded that, given Dylan's admission to planning to drug and assault Lila, no reasonable prosecutor would pursue charges against a father protecting his daughter, the lawyer sent. Richard Cole received a letter stating that any more threats or attempts at legal action would be deemed harassment, and that we would file our own charges if he did not stop immediately. Meanwhile, Mia began visiting a child therapist twice a week to process what she had experienced and the remorse she felt for shaving Lila's head, despite the fact that she had been attempting to protect her sister. The therapist said that Mia had been carrying the weight of knowing about the abuse for months and felt helpless to stop it, which is why she took such severe action when she learned about Dylan's prom night plans. After a few sessions, the therapist recommended that we check into a restorative justice program, where Mia could make apologies for the head shaving in a healthy way that would allow her to process her emotions. Mia wrote Lila a 3-page letter apologizing for cutting her hair, but also describing how afraid she was and how she didn't know how else to keep her safe that night. She also began volunteering at the local domestic abuse shelter, sorting contributions and preparing care packages for children who had to leave their homes immediately. Dylan broke the protective order 2 months into the court procedures when his pals began showing up at Lila's school with messages from him expressing his desire to work things out and missing her. The first time it happened, Lila came home shivering and showed me the note that one of Dylan's basketball teammates had stuffed into her locker. We documented everything and reported it to Detective Bennett, who entered it into the case file and warned Dylan that any more infractions would result in instant arrest. But it continued happening, with other people putting notes in her books or approaching her in the hallway to suggest giving Dylan another chance. Each time we photographed the evidence and filed reports, creating a paper trail that demonstrated Dylan's inability to respect boundaries, even when a court order was in place. During this time, Lila began attending a support group at the hospital for teenagers who had been harmed by boyfriends or girlfriends. Why does Detective Bennett always finding exactly what they need at the appropriate time? Pills behind the car seat, 2 other girls approaching. Everything falls into place so smoothly that I wonder about the timing here. She sat in the circle for the first few meetings, listening to other youngsters tell their tales, but she eventually began talking about her own. She met a girl there whose ex-boyfriend had shattered her elbow, and another whose girlfriend used to lock her in closets when she was angry. They all understood what it was like to love someone who injured you and feel as if you couldn't tell anyone, because they wouldn't understand or would think you were overdramatic. 6 months after Mia shaved Lila's head, the criminal trial began at the downtown courthouse. Dylan's counsel attempted to portray him as a good kid from a good family who had made mistakes in a relationship but did not deserve to have his entire future ruined. The prosecutor presented all of the evidence, including images of Lila's bruises, Mia's recording of Dylan preparing to drug her, the drugs discovered in his car, and testimony from the other girls who dated him. When it came time for Lila to testify, she wore her prom dress and stepped to the witness stand with her head held high, despite the fact that her hands were shaking. She described Dylan grabbing her arm so hard that he left marks, pushing her into walls, and hitting her stomach where no one could see the injuries. She recalled being always scared, never knowing what would set him off or cause him to hurt her, and how he'd buy her jewelry or flowers afterward, telling her he loved her too much to control himself at times. The prosecutor requested Lila to step down and then brought Mia to the stand. My young child stepped up there in her prettiest outfit, a pink one with unicorns on it, and the bailiff had to turn the microphone down for her. She raised her right hand and swore to tell the truth in that serious voice that children use when they realize something is extremely important. The prosecution hit play on Mia's tape recorder, and the entire courtroom fell silent as Dylan's voice filled the room, discussing getting Lila intoxicated and putting things in her drink at Jake's party. I noticed the jurors' expressions alter as they heard him giggle about how he'd make sure she couldn't say no this time, and how getting her pregnant would lock her down before college. One older woman on the jury covered her mouth, while another male shook his head, appalled. Dylan's lawyer stepped up, claiming that the tape was illegal because Dylan had no idea he was being filmed, but the court interrupted him. She claimed Mia made the recording in her own house, where Dylan had no expectation of privacy, and that the evidence would stand. Dylan's face turned crimson red, and he began furiously talking to his lawyer, who continued to shake his head. The prosecution questioned Mia why she taped Dylan, and she answered in hushed tones that she had seen Lila's bruises and wanted proof because adults don't always believe children. 2 days later, my husband took the stand, and I could see his hands shaking as he sat. He told the court about noticing Lila's bruises and approaching Dylan at school, admitting to grabbing Dylan's shirt but claiming that he was trying to protect his daughter. The prosecutor demonstrated how Dylan exploited the incident to threaten and control our family, which was just another example of his manipulative behavior. Dylan's lawyer attempted to portray my husband as the aggressor, but the jury was not convinced after hearing everything. On the third day of testimony, after hearing from the investigator about the narcotics discovered in Dylan's car, and from 2 other girls who dated him, the jury proceeded into deliberation. We waited in the hallway for 4 hours, drinking awful coffee from the vending machine and jumping whenever the door opened. When they brought us back in, the foreman stood up and pleaded guilty to all significant charges, including assault, conspiracy to conduct sexual assault, and possession of prohibited narcotics. Dylan's face became white and his mother began crying, while his father, Richard, sat there with his jaw clenched. 3 weeks later, during sentencing, the judge sentenced Dylan to 2 years in juvenile jail, 3 years probation, obligatory treatment, and a permanent restraining order to keep him away from Lila. Richard Cole confronted us in the parking lot afterward, his face flushed as he threatened appeals and legal cases, claiming we'd ruined his son's future with teenage love drama. My husband came up to him and told him in a cool, icy tone that his son was a predator who had finally been caught. Perhaps if Richard had been a better parent, none of this would have occurred. Richard appeared to want to hit my husband, but there were officers everywhere, so he simply got into his Mercedes and drove away. Something changed in Lila almost immediately after Dylan was locked up. She resumed sleeping through the night and stopped panicking when doors slammed. She decided she wanted to assist other girls detect the warning signs of abuse, and began collaborating with the school counselor to create assemblies where she could share her experience. Her voice shook the first time she spoke in front of the entire junior class, but she persevered, telling how Dylan had isolated her from her classmates, and made her believe the abuse was her responsibility. After her lecture, 3 girls approached her personally, and asked for assistance with their own issues. Following our case, the school board held a special meeting and invited experts on teen dating violence to train all teachers and staff. They developed new standards for reporting suspected abuse and began offering healthy relationship programs in health education. The principal told us that until Lila's instance, they had no idea how frequent this problem was. Meanwhile, Lila's hair began to regrow in soft fuzzy patches, which she frequently ran her hand over. She experimented with various caps and scarves at first, but eventually realized she preferred the incredibly short appearance, and kept it buzzed for a while. She informed me that her short hair reminded her that Mia loved her enough to go to such lengths to save her, and that she was strong enough to survive anything. Mia turned all of her protective energy into constructive action, volunteering with us at domestic abuse awareness events and assisting in the creation of care packages for women's shelters. She adorned each present with her drawings and added words such as, "You're brave, and you deserve to be safe." The shelter supervisor stated that Mia's packages always made the women smile, even on their hardest days. My husband began leaving work early on Thursdays to be home when the daughters returned from school. He had never done something like this in his 15-year marriage. We'd sit at the kitchen table with cookies and milk as they did their homework, inquiring about their day, and truly listening to their responses rather than just going through the motions. Every Sunday night, we had family meetings in which anyone may bring up whatever topic they wanted to discuss without judgment. Lila began to open up about simple things, such as being concerned about an exam, or frustrated with a friend, before progressing to larger issues such as learning to trust her own judgment again. Mia would show her art therapy artwork and explain how the colors represented her feelings that week. 6 months flew by, filled with therapy appointments and court hearings, while I slowly rebuilt my usual life. Our family dinners were louder again, with actual laughter replacing the strained silence we'd experienced when Dylan was present. Lila joined the debate team and began winning competitions, discovering her voice in more ways than one. Mia trained herself to knit and created scarves for everyone at the women's shelter for Christmas. Lila found a safe haven at the hospital's support group, where she met other survivors who understood what she had gone through. There was this boy named Adam, whose ex-girlfriend had been stalking him for months, and he and Lila began discussing boundaries and warning signs after encounters. He never pushed for anything more than friendship at first, simply listening when she wanted to talk and making her laugh with bad jokes about their shared therapy homework. When he finally asked her to a movie 3 months after they met, he gave her 3 possible departure methods in case she felt uneasy and told her his mother would pick them up if she wanted to go early. They took things so slowly that their first kiss didn't occur until 2 months into their relationship, and Adam requested permission beforehand. Mia was nominated for a citizenship award at school for creating a comprehensive effort to identify abuse warning flags following what happened to Lila. She created posters with simple messages that even elementary school students could grasp, and persuaded the principal to permit age-appropriate presentations for all grade levels. On the day she received the prize, she dressed her nicest outfit and delivered a speech about how safeguarding those you care about requires speaking up even when it is frightening. Detective Bennett called us every few weeks with an update, always starting with how the girls were doing before getting into the legal details. She told us Dylan got into 3 fights in his first month in the prison center, attacking smaller children exactly like he had with Lila. He was relocated to a higher security facility after breaking another child's nose, and his release date was pushed back another 6 months due to his violent behavior. His father attempted to appeal the conviction twice, but the judge denied both appeals, particularly after Dylan's prison record demonstrated the pattern of aggression was true. Lila's graduation day came with wonderful weather, and her hair had grown out to a pretty pixie cut that she'd learned to manage with small clips. She went across the stage as salutatorian to wild applause from our section, where even Mia's art therapy group had come to support her. Dylan picking fights with lesser students in detention demonstrates that the apple doesn't fall far from the entitled tree. I guess those anger management seminars aren't on the Juvie Prep Academy curriculum yet. Her lecture was about finding strength in unexpected places and realizing that asking for help is the bravest thing you can do. She thanked Mia by name for saving her life, and I saw my youngest daughter shed happy tears for the first time since this all began. College acceptance letters had been arriving for weeks, and Lila chose a school 3 hours away, far enough to be self-sufficient, but close enough to return home whenever necessary. That summer, she enrolled in a self-defense class and persuaded Adam to join her, and the two of them learned healthy techniques to protect themselves. We went dorm shopping together, and she chose bright colors instead of the somber outfits she had worn during the Dylan months. She displayed a photo of our family on her desk, including one of her and Mia from after the trial, laughing at something on Mia's phone. Lila crawled into Mia's bed the night before she left for college, as they had done when they were younger. The next morning, I found them curled up together, Mia's arm protectively flung over her big sister, even while she slept. As we loaded the car, Lila hugged Mia and muttered something that made them both cry and giggle simultaneously.